All right, check the mic. After dark, we're live. Buffalo Bills get the win over the Miami Dolphins. It's 31-21. Bills move to 3-0. Dolphins move to 0-3. Pretty good game though, Sam. I know the Bills were favored by 10.5, 11, depending on when you got it. 10-point game, but I thought the Dolphins, they played hard, came out swinging with a really good first drive.
Yeah, they did. I think you have to give Miami credit. I know it ended up being a 10-point game, but this was a close game for the majority of it. It didn't feel like it should be, but I think minimum you have to say, look, Miami hasn't given up, right? Mike McDaniel hasn't lost the locker room. They haven't completely bailed on him. It felt like the vibes were so bad that this game could have cascaded out of control, particularly when Buffalo – in this first and second quarter, when they started to take control, drive down the field, score at ease, and when they got any kind of lead, it would have been easy, I think, for this to go completely out of control and Miami to collapse and the whole thing to blow up. But they didn't. They fought back. They got a little bit of luck here and there, but they hung in this game until late. And then really it came down to, a couple of mistakes late in the game that Miami made and Buffalo didn't.
Miami got up 7-0 with that really nice first drive. Buffalo came back with 2 touchdowns of their own, 14-7. And then Buffalo misses a field goal, in the second quarter, could have gone up 10. And Miami, just an outstanding drive before the half, 16 plays, 71 yards, continued to convert on third and fourth down. I know you'll have a great stat for us later on where to his yards were all coming from. They just kept converting. So it was 14-14 at the half. It was a good game. Dolphins kept coming back, but 2 massive mistakes in the second half for Miami. Roughing the kicker, the punter.
Yeah.
They were about to force the Bills to punt for 3 straight possessions, which is impressive for this Miami defense against this Bills offense. 3 straight possessions, and then Zach Sealer roughs the punter, and that gives the Bills more life. They throw a touchdown pass, Josh Allen to Khalil Shakir to take the 7-point lead, and then later – the Dolphins, they're still fighting. They're still coming back. They're down 7, and Tua throws a pick. Terrell Bernard jumping a short route. And so those 2 mistakes really stood out. And Buffalo, besides the missed field goal, not a ton of big mistakes on Buffalo's side.
Yeah. Buffalo made a couple of small mistakes, but Miami made a couple of massive mistakes that, whether or not they were going to completely collapse and wilt and disappear, they're not as good a team as Buffalo. So if they were going to win it, they needed to be the team that made fewer big mistakes. Mike McDaniel, talked about it's imperative that they win the turnover battle. I think you can just, turnover battle is the most obvious sort of summation of it, but really you just need to win the kind of massive high leverage plays, mistakes, those things. You need those to go your way in a net term rather than the opposition. And they didn't from Miami. They went the opposite direction. Tua's interception was really bad, pretty inexcusable, difficult to understand why he did that as well. The play was kind of setting up so that linebacker was always going to be a factor. I'm not quite sure why he didn't know that. Threw the ball right to him. The roughing the kicker or the roughing the punter penalty, brutal. Zach Sealer is a great player. He's an underrated player. He took the long snapper and just bulldozed him, ran right over the top of him, planted him on his backside, thought he could make the kick once he'd done that. I've reverse pancake this guy. I buried him. I can get the kick, doesn't make it, doesn't get the block. And then, 300-pound body launching himself towards the kicker. There's just no way he can pull it back at that point, and unfortunately commits the penalty. And that's huge. If they had forced that 3rd consecutive punt from Buffalo, this is a real game, and Buffalo's nervous at that point, and maybe Miami's got a chance of winning. Instead, you extend the drive, the Bills score a touchdown at that point, and I think at that stage, belief disappeared a bit for Miami.
It was a calculated risk at that point. As you said, you're getting close. You get to make this hero play, maybe block the punt. It was at midfield, so on one hand, it's at midfield. Are you going to actually block it versus roughing and giving Buffalo the ball in Miami territory once again? The punt was down to, I think, at the 2, so it would have been difficult field position for Miami, but Sealer took a shot there. And so, but that was a huge play in the game. You're giving the Bills extra opportunities. And I thought they played a really clean, efficient game offensively. James Cook over 100 yards once again. We took that over today over at FanDuel, 67.5. He hit that by the second quarter, I believe it was. Smooth running from James Cook. A lot of underneath stuff from Josh Allen, 22 of 28 for 213 and 3 touchdowns, including the little swing bubble screen to Khalil Shakir, which was the eventual game winner. Nice game by Dalton Kincaid as well, by the way. 5 catches for 66. He had the first touchdown for Buffalo, a key block on that Shakir touchdown. Really like what Buffalo's doing offensively, how they're using the multiple tight ends. Rookie Jackson Hawes as a run-blocking tight end instead of the 6th offensive lineman that Buffalo usually uses. Hawes had that touchdown from Allen on the shovel pass, like what they're getting from him. So just another well-rounded effort, I think, from the Bills. And they win the turnover battle for, the 25th straight game here.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny because it felt like Buffalo was dramatically the better side, but Miami was keeping themselves in it by their play on 3rd and 4th down. They're ending the game something like 90 yards ahead. So it wasn't, night and day because they stalled for that, huge period of time, the 2 consecutive punts and then almost the 3rd one until Miami gave them the extended drive. But Tua ends up with 146 passing yards, but he averaged 1.9 yards per attempt on 1st and 2nd down. Like he's 13 of 21, I think, for 40 yards on 1st and 2nd down. But then they kept getting the conversion on 3rd and 4th down. That's what happened before halftime when they got that drive, multiple key, 3rd down plays on that drive to extend it. And that was a huge drive, or it felt like it at the time. And then, later in the game as well, when they were having successful drives, it was all these high leverage 3rd and 4th down plays. So it always sort of felt like Miami was clinging onto this game by the skin of their teeth. And then eventually when they made the big mistakes, it's like, you're just not going to be able to overcome that unless you figure out how to work on 1st and 2nd down as well.
Isn't that where Buffalo always seems to have Miami's number, is taking away Tua's first read, taking away the middle of the field? I thought they've always seemingly done a really nice job against Mike McDaniel's offenses, taking away the stuff that they want to do. And the number of times that Tua either hit Devin Achane on the escort screen, I believe is what Kirk was calling it, the escort play, the swing screen where there's a eligible receiver blocker in front. I felt like because it's kind of like a half check down, half screen, check down with the blocker. It was like 5 or 6 of those for Achane. He only had 7 catches. He had 7 catches for 29 yards in this game. Yeah, they could not create explosive plays on early downs. I thought Tua did a pretty good job early on using his legs. It's not really his game, but he scrambled a couple times when he needed to. Had a scramble drill pass that was rare, and doesn't do that very often. So I thought he did a nice job with that early when those first reads were taken away. But yeah, I didn't realize how dink and dunk the pass game was until you see the numbers later and how difficult it was for them to get anything going on 1st down, because the Dolphins ran the ball pretty well too. David Achane ran well. I thought Gordon ran well, especially in and around the goal line. He had a touchdown. Like there was a lot of good stuff there from Miami, but it came down to you're playing the Bills and you can't make the monstrous mistakes that they made at the end.
Yeah, and look, Tua heaved up a pass for Tyreek Hill that I think Tyreek Hill should have caught that. He kind of let it go through his hands it was kind of into double coverage, a jump ball, but Tyreek Hill had position, got his hands on it, and kind of let it go through them with a hit on the way. That's a play that Tyreek Hill would expect to make and would have. I mean, that materially changes to a stat line for a start.
Again, from like a what happens now perspective, starting with Buffalo, another game where Josh Allen had 4 carries for 25 yards, didn't have to do a whole lot, had a 19-yarder in there. It wasn't, even though it got close, they didn't break the glass, right? They didn't say, hey, Josh, go convert every 3rd down. I think Buffalo's beyond that in most games now, and that's huge, right? The ability to just hand it off to James Cook and let him do some damage. He had a lot of room to run, which I thought was fantastic, and they spread the ball around a ton. It was, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, Elijah Moore had a huge play toward the end there. So Tyrell Shavers with a couple catches. Keon Coleman had some targets. They're spreading the ball around like crazy. Just a good win from Buffalo, and they look like a well-rounded team. And with their upcoming, their schedule's not difficult, right? It's like they've got this path because they beat the Ravens early in the season. They still have the Chiefs in the middle of the year. They have this path to the number 1 seed where if you were predicting it, it feels like the Bills have the cleanest path to make the playoffs go through Buffalo.
Yeah, and remember, they're missing a couple players in this game, significant players like Ed Oliver, Matt Milano, 2 significant players in that defense were not playing as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think when they come in and they sort of analyze this game internally, I think they'll be a little bit annoyed that they did stall for that period of time and couldn't really put the gas, put the pedal on, or put the foot on the gas pedal and, really go out of sight and just make it a complete blowout. But ultimately, even in a game where that happened, they still ended up winning by 10 points, and it was, reasonably comfortable by the end of it all. But when they were, when they were in rhythm, when they were in sync, they looked fantastic. Josh Allen is extremely good and efficient and dangerous on the ground. I think you're seeing now that it's a little bit like Green Bay's receiving core, where it's, all the focus is on the lack of a number 1 guy. But it is a well-rounded, it is a pretty, dangerous and complete receiving core. It's very different from everybody else's. I mean, you've got 3 legitimate tight ends that are all useful players. You've got that group of kind of slot weapons. You've got, Keon Coleman is the big-bodied guy that they want to use for contested catches, for better or worse. Like, it's an interesting group, and it's functional. They'll just be annoyed that they didn't really put their foot on the gas.
And then from Miami's perspective, 0-3 start, but this wasn't the disastrous performance we thought it could be. So they played hard, they fought, they were supposed to lose. They lose by 10, but it was a lot closer than that, as we said. So I don't know what happens from here for Miami. They're in some sense what we thought they might be. I still think the offensive line has massive issues. That's why looking at sack totals it's very difficult to do. Deion Walker was into his face on that interception, the rookie defensive tackle. He was in his face in about 0.9 seconds. Like, Tua caught the ball, looked right, and threw it. Deion Walker at 6'7", 340 was in his face almost immediately. The Dolphins, why can't the Dolphins get the ball down the field? They really can't trust the guards in particular, backup tackle. They can't trust that offensive line to hold up in pass protection. Ironically, outside of Patrick Paul, the second rounder, who had enough question marks coming into the season. He's been pretty decent. You liked him coming out. So Miami's struggling on the offensive line, kind of expected, but the defensive line, they should be better. They should not so much as power players, but they should be way more disruptive than they've been in the past game. They have some dudes on the edge, Chop Robinson, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, brought in Matthew Judon. They should be much better on the defensive line. I think that's been the biggest disappointment for the Dolphins through 3 games.
Yeah, the sum of that group has been extremely disappointing. It should be much better, even when you factor in, what they have playing in the secondary, and that's definitely a factor. Like they had the worst secondary in the NFL on paper, and it's been getting worse as people get banged up and get injured, and they just keep losing guys from the secondary as well. So that's absolutely going to affect the defensive line because of that symbiotic relationship. But I think even adjusting for that, this group should be making more of an impact than it is. And it's disappointing that it isn't. That's definitely a concern for them. Like, in a normal circumstance or in a vacuum, I think the Dolphins would come out of this game as like a sort of moral victory, right? Yeah, we lost, but we gave a good account of ourselves. We fought hard. We didn't give up. All the feel stuff, right, was actually reasonably good in this game, even though that's been the worst thing about Miami's season so far. It's just that it's hard to cling to that when you're already 0-2 coming into the game and the vibes were bad coming into it. It is wild that this is week 3, right? First game of week 3. It was week 3 just 2 years ago where they won with 70 points on the board. Should have been 73 if they didn't, give it up essentially at the end. Like, they beat a team and hung 70 on them 2 years ago. And now they look like they're on the way to a bad record and the whole thing's going to get blown up.
But we covered it. We covered this in the season preview for Miami. They were trading for Jalen Ramsey and Tyreek Hill that offseason to get after it, right? To take advantage of the Tua rookie contract, as we always say. One thing we don't talk about from a team building standpoint is once the rookie contract is up, And the guys that you went and got who get a little bit older, how do you transition there? And there was never a youth movement in Miami. There wasn't enough of a youth movement. They just don't have the depth. They don't have the offensive line depth, the defensive line. They shouldn't look old. Like Bradley Chubb's a little bit older now. Jalen Phillips isn't that old, though, other than injuries. Chop Robinson's in year 2. Kenneth Grant's a rookie. They shouldn't look old on the defensive line, but clearly the depth in the secondary, they were already bad at corner, and then they were on to like quarterbacks 4, 5, and 6. So it's that whole lack of depth, I think, compounding for Miami. But you're right. Just 2 years ago, was that their peak? That was their peak, right? Where they beat up on some bad teams and still hit their ceiling against good teams. They're a worse team than they were a couple years ago, and that's why they're 0-3.
It's just a while. Like we always sort of think about how quickly you can build a team in 2 years, whether you can go from the basement to how good you can get. I mean, this is an indication of how fast it can go the other way as well. It literally in the space of 2 years, they've gone from an unstoppable offense that was hanging 70 points on somebody to right now, the offense. I mean, it was clinging on just by unsustainable play on 3rd and 4th down in this game. And this has been probably the best of the 3 outputs they've had this season.
It's just an interesting dynamic from a team building standpoint. If you have that go for it year, you give up some picks to go get some players, you almost immediately need to balance it out by trading down with whatever you have left and add volume from a draft perspective. You got to diversify the portfolio, and Miami has not done that. And so that's where we are. They play the Jets next week, so there might be some hope there for Miami.
Yeah, that should be a shot.
So yeah, that's Thursday Night Football. It was way more entertaining than it could have been. I enjoyed that game. It was a good football game. Miami hung tough. As always, we previewed every single game this morning, many hours ago. It's right here on the YouTube channel, wherever you listen to your podcast. So go check that out, our Week 3 preview. And we'll be back here Sunday evening in between the 4s and the 7s. If you want to check out the memberships, go check those out. Check what we have to offer.
Yeah, big thanks to all the members. I see them in the chat right now with the green names on them, and of course we got our first Howard Hughes billionaire member as well. So an awesome day for all the members, and I think we got some cool stuff in the pipeline for the members.
Next week, by the way, next Thursday, week from tonight, we'll do a watch along, a members only watch along, and then the regular show recap. Right, so we'll do the watch along on the couch over at the studio, and then we'll click record right after that. Instant reaction to Cardinals Seahawks. So you gotta join at least one of the membership groups for the watch along next Thursday. All right. Anything else, Sam?
Nope.
All right. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you Sunday in between the games.